thank you everyone who has joined here on time. Like I'm seeing 25 people who were already present in the waiting room. So thank you so much for being on time for this conversation. It helps us to start on time and also end the conversation on time because we have so many questions and we have a person who has so much of wisdom in the art and the creativity space today. And we want to, just dig as much as we can into his place today to get answers to so many questions that we have. I'm going to request all the people who are listening to this, watching this, to please keep yourself muted throughout the conversation. It just disturbs the flow of the conversation and the chain of thoughts that we are speaking about. Anytime you all have any questions or you want to point out a comment or an opinion about something that someone is saying, or you want to put in a sub question about a particular topic, just please feel free to put it in the chat section throughout the conversation and make sure that I keep checking the chat section, and if there's something that's relevant to what is being spoken at that point of time, I'll make sure that we take your questions. And now, if we can officially and formally start with Summer's introduction, I'm going to introduce you all. Obviously, everyone knows we have communicated to the audience and participants the work that you do in your website and everything else. But let me also just formally start this, and then I'm going to ask Tina to introduce you to the work that they do at Boltiban. And then we'll get into the questions. Um, so Samar Joda is a photographer and an installation artist working over 3 decades on marginalization and conflict issues across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. He is also the judge on Nat Geo Cover Shot and is a regular speaker on TED, TEDx, including speaking at TED Vienna on artists' role on sustainability and capacity building. Summer's work has been widely, published and has been shown on public art platforms globally. He is also keenly invested in youth, a group that he believes has the power to lead and enable social impact. Also, sort of the reason why we wanted to invite him and talk about certain topics and things that we're going to discuss today. He is also the founder of Red Balloon, an organization based on a collaborative ecosystem, which is to create large-scale mobilization and impact. With art and design at its core, Team Red Balloon builds partnerships with children of all ages and backgrounds, raises awareness on critical issues, and enables individual leadership to lead change. And we're going to speak about all the work that he has done throughout these last 3 decades, and also a lot of philosophical and I'm going to be a little selfish throughout this conversation to ask certain my art questions that I always feel that I'm going into a rabbit hole when I'm thinking about these questions. Samar, thank you so much for giving us your time today on a Sunday evening. And we are very, very thankful and grateful for you to give us your time. And if you'll allow us, I'll quickly introduce you to Trina, and Trina can tell you about the work that we do at Bolti Ban. Trina, over to you.
Thank you, Pavan. At Bolti Band, we build dialogue between politically polarized sides and groups or individuals. We get people who, in very simple language, we get people who have very different opinions on an issue. It could be gender, it could be climate change, it could be menstrual hygiene. And all these examples, we've actually curated dialogues on these, and we get people who do not agree on these in a room. And we use simulations, sometimes we use theater, sometimes it's just curated dialogue, with the purpose that each of them understand the other. They don't necessarily need to agree. Our goal is not that we reach consensus, because we believe that consensus is a myth anyway. As long as human beings exist, there will be different opinions. But the problem we are trying to tackle is these days we have such extreme reactions to a difference in opinion, where we are saying that leave the country or you deserve to die because you have a different belief. And we are trying to shift the needle on that to get people to understand where the other person is coming from, which of their life experiences have brought them to this belief system. And then they're welcome to leave the room disagreeing still. So at Boltiban, we curate a lot of these dialogues directly. And we also run a fellowship program where we have fellows who do very different things. And Pavan is one of them. And we know that Pavan wears many hats. He's a content creator. He's a creative. He's an artist. We have, Nainika, who's on this call, who's one of our fellows. We have fellows who work with on Dalit rights issues and menstrual health issues. And along with our fellows, we are building different projects to show how we can build more understanding in society. And this series of podcasts that Pavan and we are doing together is to build. So therefore, each of the dialogues in these series, the first one was what we don't understand about politics. Then we did what we didn't understand about the internet, and now Samar, here we are to talk about what we don't understand about creativity, because that's what we want to know. Your life experiences brought you here. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Reena. Thank you so much. Um, Samar, anything that you want to say before we begin? Because I have big questions to throw in front
Yeah.
of you once we start.
Well, hi everyone, and let's get on with it.
Okay, that's great. We get more time to talk about as many questions as we want. Samar, so in all of these conversations, the past few conversations that we have done, we start with a broad topic, and then we try to come down and narrow down the subtopics about it and everything else. So, particularly in this conversation, I want to start with a very broad question. And all of my the fellows and the team members told me that don't start with this question. Uh, but I feel I want to ask you that what is the purpose of creativity in this society or in the world, according to you?
Well, I won't give you my PhD on it, but to keep it simple, I think creativity, it exists with each of us. It's there, and people get, unfortunately, we get so labeled, branded, put in a box that creativity means that you have to be a painter or a performer or an artist. I think it exists in every person because the way we are, what kind of clothes are we going to wear, what kind of food we enjoy, how we arrange furniture in the house, how we, so so creativity is all around us. It's not nothing to do with the, I mean, sure, you have to put logic. So, behind you is this beautiful San Francisco Bay you can see. It's creativity, but then you need your left brain, so to make that engineers to come in and create that bridge, so it's all about that bridging, I would say. I mean, it's a great metaphor what you have behind you.
And what do you think is the role of creativity and art in peace building and solving social problems or building a better society for us? How can art or creativity catalyze these things in the society?
Yeah, so see, typically I would say, when you look at you may be whichever part you subscribe, either your mind, left or right, or whether it's your politics, or whether it's your religion, your culture, your whatever it is, your background, region, whatever that is, nationality and all that. There are certain things where we kind of merge together. And what are those points where we merge? We merge on empathy, we merge on compassion, we merge on intuition. These are all inner things, and creativity is something which is common ground, which is what binds us. There is nothing like, let's say we get deeper into it, art, and let's say people say this is good art or a bad art or whatever. I don't believe in, I mean, not me, a lot of us don't believe in what is good or bad art. It's all about connecting you at a much deeper level, which is not about doing your logical thinking, the math of 2 plus 2 is 4. So, I mean, I just find that it's a very much the engagement platform for humanity.
And how do we label if something is art or creativity or let's say a creative product or not? For example, do we should we consider a meme as an art today, or let's say uh, how this background is, or what can we necessarily label as art and something not as art?
No, so I think, as I said earlier, I think it's not about art, it's just about creativity. It is about imagination. Now, some people have imagination. They might be great writers, they may be great storytellers, or that imagination may reflect in their daily behavior, in terms of that, I want to wear this shirt because this sweater works with it, so, and I'm really simplifying it, as I said earlier, that, I don't want to create rocket science out of what I learned at art school and art history and get into such deeper things where most of the audience are not interested. There's enough out there they can read. But this is really my personal take. And I don't think, as I said, creativity is not about labeling the practice. Creativity is your behavior. How you engage with immediate family, how you engage with your spouse, how you engage with your dog. How do you engage with your environment? That those are the things which is what makes us, where our imagination works. It's not about that I have to do a calculation that how do I talk to my spouse, or how do I love my mother, or how do I love my children. It's a very free flowing thing which is within us. Unfortunately, which I keep saying, is that because you have to survive in this world, so we go through all these education and all these survival modes before we get on the treadmill, and we kind of disconnect with everything. And as you know, that what the world has come, let's say COVID is a very good example, that we have been through this whole process, and we realized that we didn't really exactly manage to make a better world, because I think it just got so involved in that selfish and about yourself, less concerned about your community or friends or family or your environment. So sorry, it's a very long drawn answer, but you get it in what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So can I say that you are trying to say creativity or art is more like how you behave or how you do things rather than like a particular product or a piece of product.
Right.
If that's what you are saying, what do you think about how will artificial intelligence change the concept of creativity?
Yeah, so I think I remember when computers were introduced in the art business, where you could do things on a laptop. Well, not laptop; they were actually desktops, where you could take a piece of color and you can, what you would do, let's say in a Photoshop with your pictures, you could do that, and it was like, man, this is over now. But it's not over. It's not gonna be ever over, because human experience, it doesn't matter how much your technology comes through. Human experience is something which cannot be mechanized. It may be mechanized that, okay, you come into this cold room and you can heat it up, or you can stand in a 360 space where you can see, a projection all around. Sure, those are there. But I think human experience is beyond that, the feeling of what we are. And I think it'll take a while. I mean, we have become robots on, working in a mechanical way. But end of the day, when we get out of that office, we finish with that screen time, we do become humans. We do want to spend that time, have dinner with our family, or your cat, dog, whatever it is. So I think it's AI. I wouldn't just want to brand it as that, it's going to just destroy what we are inside. It's going to take over a lot of things, a lot of automation, a lot of mechanized way how things are done. But I think there's a lot more we are made of.
Got it. Going to move from this set of philosophical or whatever futuristic kind of questions to something that someone has put a question in the Google form that we shared. And this person is asking, do you ever regret not completing school?
No, I mean, it's pretty simple answer. I think as somebody said to me that, the reason I've managed to do whatever I do in my small ways is because I don't have any baggage of art or design or photo or film schools, which I've been to all these various pieces. And I think that has managed to keep my outlook, in not so much of a assembly line thought process. I don't mean that everybody who goes through creative education, they get into that space. But I know about myself that I would have become very mechanical person, which I'm not. So I would have just struggled all my life,
And do you think, is it similar for other kind of education domains also, or is it just for the art or creative domain that you think if you go into the mainstream education format, we would become mechanical inner thinking or inner process? Do you think this would also be similar for, let's say, if someone wants to learn software or coding?
Right. Yeah, I think this is a much larger thought here. I think if you, let's say, get into coding, for example, do you want to do something which is just going to be a very mechanical coding, or are you very aware of where your this mechanic or whatever this stuff you're developing, what impact it's going to have with, and these are all very personal calls. I have friends who would never work on, they are really very, very specialized in software, but they would never work on any project which would involve anything to do with defense, because it's their personal call, that I don't want to be part of that. I know myself, there was a time when I used to shoot so many golf courses, and it was really highly paying, it was always aerial, helicopter, this is all before drone and all that. But, came a point where you realize that, this is probably the worst sport you can be on. Sorry to my golfer friends if anybody's watching it. But, it creates a huge impact on. So what I'm trying to get to is that, it's your choices you make. It doesn't matter what kind of profession you are in. I totally understand that, you have to pay your bills, you need to, but, if you're aware of things, you're just going to be, if you're sensitive about issues, believe you me, there'll come a point where you'll be able to shift yourself more to your own liking. Why does, Sunday night, tonight is a very good example. Sunday night, 99% or whatever percentage of people are just a number I'm throwing. Why do people get so stressed that it's Monday morning? They have to be on a job tomorrow morning, because they've got all these bills and, they want the bonus, they want to go have a holiday in Maldives, whatever it is. But the reality is this, that because of that education which you took, which was about that safety space, your parents told you, your buddies told you, whatever it is. And then I have a friend who was, a big time lawyer, and he had a huge accident. He had, I think he was in coma for, I don't know how long. And then he came back, he quit all that, and he became, he basically, as a kid, he used to love going to the bakery with his mother. And, this old man, he was in his 50s. He quit all that and he became a baker in his 50s. He wasn't making that kind of money, but, he lived to what, so many times what happens is most of us go through processes in life and then we say, okay, I don't want this. Each of us have our own ways and limitations, or whatever the circumstances, environment, whatever that is. Some are fortunate that they click on it. I got my first camera when I was 13, 14, in one of these very fancy international schools on foothills of Kilimanjaro. And I said, I want to be a photographer. I had no idea what I was going to be. I mean, photography, what photography? My father came from a very extreme other end. He was a PhD in economics. And, those times it's like, what kind of pictures are you going to... So the point I'm trying to make is that, we find our own ways, our own path. The only thing you got to remember is that always keep your antennas up, because when they're up, then you will go and tune into something. If you just get so narrow-minded that, I figured out how to, make this bottle opener and I'm going to keep making that, there'll come a point where you will be like, what am I doing with myself,
Got it. And any suggestions, because, you answered that, you have to keep your antennas open just to be aware about everything. Any pointers that somebody should follow about how to find that path for themselves, or let's say how to figure out that process for themselves, or basically how to put your antennas wide awake? How can someone practice that, and how can somebody do that?
Right. So see,
Because being self-aware is not that easy of a task, right? I mean, being
right.
consciously self-aware about your surrounding, about your own self, is also like a big process altogether. So how can someone follow that, or get on the path of that?
Right. It's a very good, it's a very logical question. My personal experience has been, or what I believe is, I was just miserable at everything else. So when I found something, I stuck to it. And, I kept falling, I kept failing also in there, but I didn't step back from it. That grit, which is about that this is what I'm going to do, and it's not about being a photographer. I don't even do that kind of photography anymore. But I think what really helps is that as human beings, we get very comfortable in that whatever we have figured out. Even in school level, I figured out math, so I'm going to stick to math because I'm going to be whatever, mathematician, whatever that is, right? But, when you take yourself and if you apply this for, everything you do in life, that go to places, go and explore and read and go internet, go places, go travel, speak, eat, whatever, things which you can't figure out. When you can't figure out, mind is a muscle, you keep lifting your weights, you know that it's going to just develop here, right? And the same thing happens with your head also. If you're going to go into spaces where they're going to make you uncomfortable, I don't mean that go on a dark alley and get shot, but what I'm trying to
Yeah.
get to is that you bring
Yeah.
yourself to places where it's going to make you think differently. And this is the process, and it doesn't matter what profession you are in, because that is what's going to develop yourself. And what other thing which it really raises it is your hunger level, because the fear of failure, the hunger you have, all these things really make you what you will become as a person. Otherwise, it's and I don't mean your father's my dad giving me some trust fund or something. I don't mean the money part of it. All I'm saying is that experiences really make you what you are finally, and experience is ongoing. You will have it till your last breath. You will have some experience which you've never experienced before.
Makes sense, because the more you also read, or let's say listen to different stories of different creators, or let's say not just creators but let's say coders or people who are in the other domains as well, you get exposed to a lot of new ideas, a lot of new pathways, and that maybe can help you just create like a whole set of path for your own self. One small question about this, and then we're going to move towards your Bhopal gas tragedy work. Um, do you think today the world has become more multidisciplinary rather than just, let's say, a specialized individual domain kind of thing? Are we living more like a multidisciplinary lifestyle now?
Yeah, I think circumstances, which also means technology, that has really pushed her to become multidimensional or whatever, let's say multi-talented you have to be. Because I think there was a time, if you were, I mean, it's an old example I keep giving, let's say photography. If you were a rich kid, or if you're a professional photographer or an amateur, then you had a camera. Otherwise, there was no business for you to be being a photographer. But the minute technology came in, that today everything has moved to, let's say, even a phone, all of a sudden billions of pictures are being made. Now, again, not being judgmental about it, that, oh, this is a good picture, this is a bad picture, there's so much of noise, all digital space and all that. That's not what we are talking about. We are talking about that people are able to do things which they couldn't do earlier, which also means a lot of nonsense too, because everybody's a PhD on everything today on social media, because, all of a sudden they're historians too, and they're political scientists, they're everything. But, leaving that aside, I think, what technology has done to us is that, and the market requirement, I mean, I work with very young people, and I look at them, and they're like 16, and by the time they're 30, you don't even know what jobs they're going to be doing. We don't even know if those jobs will exist. This coding thing which takes off 6 to 16, everybody think they're going to be the next Bill Gates or whatever. Reality is that AI might just take away your job next year. You want to be a pilot tomorrow, those aircrafts are not going to fly with. So I think we need to also make ourselves less mechanical, and also have less about wanting that bonus and the large growth on a treadmill. If you keep yourself simple, your needs are simple, believe you me, the happiness is automatically. We want to live happy finally. It's not about just
Yeah,
retail therapy will make you happy, right?
yeah, yeah. Um, I absolutely have loved your work on Bhopal gas tragedy, and how you have termed it as disaster pornography. But more importantly, you said during one of your speeches is that you had to sell your apartment because you couldn't afford to carry on the exhibition, because of whatever, no corporates willing to invest or something like that. I want to know that story from you about how did you, carry on your, exhibition and your showcasing your work, and how did you make that decision that I want to sell my apartment and keep doing this and keep showcasing this? How do you rationally make that decision to, let go of your house or apartment, whatever that is?
Yeah, so the reason you make that decision is because you're not rational about it. And I think other than my couple of close friends, most of them thought that it was quite ridiculous thing to do. And it wasn't just about Bhopal. There were a couple of other projects I was working. I was doing a very big show at the Venice Biennale many years back, and I had last minute, big huge trouble with the support sponsor. They pulled out. So it came to a point where what do I do? Do I say this, okay, I had this great platform to show my work, and this was working on habitat of communities. I have worked in Northeast, which I very strongly believe in that work. It's not just about art. Uh, so what is going to be when I'm 75 and 80, and I'm going to look back and I'll say, okay, you had a possibility of showing your work at this, whatever that space is, Venice Biennale, for example. But the reason I didn't do it, because I didn't have money. It's the most stupidest thing you can say to yourself. It's not about other people, it's about yourself. And if I could do it by whatever, because see, I also believe, and I don't want to get philosophical about it, but one very, very major thing in life is that we stand in our own way most of the times. Can't do it, this happened, make excuses, and you're just blocking yourself, and it's not about just the selling of the apartment, but it is about making those choices, those choices, because you don't want to be, one old man or a woman one day and just regret that you didn't do anything about it because you were caught up in something which actually didn't matter. Of course, my mother would say, why do you risk that, tomorrow if you don't have anything? But I've lived that way because that's the way what I'm as a person. And there's so many people out here or in the whole world who actually live that way. It's just that I got a platform to speak here, but there are a lot of people who do things which is not about, because you're not sitting with a calculator. Because if it is calculator, believe me, you won't be in this what I do.
So when everyone around you is, thinking very rationally about what you should do, and you have to follow your intuition or let's say your own irrationality in that particular situation, how do you make yourself, listen to your irrationality rather than what everyone around you is bombarding you with their rational thoughts? How
Right,
can this be done on a very subconscious or let's say in a
right.
very mindful way?
Right. See, I think one biggest challenge which we have, and we have that right from, when you're in school days to professional and, even when you retire. I think the biggest challenge is that we keep looking at approvals. We always keep looking at what others are talking about, what they're going to approve. What has made it worse, for especially for young people, is this whole space of social media. Even I'm a victim at one level in there, where how's my work being shown, how it's going to be perceived, where it's going to be taken, name, fame, money, whatever that is. I mean, that's not the space I'm talking about. So what happens is that even in creative space, be you a writer or be whatever you are, or even if you're a person who's working in a gym, okay, what we do is we start looking at that, am I going to get tick mark from all these people around me, and what happens there is, and then, okay, let's talk about creative space. A lot of people get stuck into, okay, I have got a big show in 2024 and let me start working on it, because you've already stood in your way because you put that date there. It's about the process. It's about the process. Do you enjoy doing the process, or are you just looking at the final on a white cube gallery? You're going to have this brilliant piece of work which is going to be hung. What you are doing is you are being dishonest to yourself, and unfortunately that reflects in your work also, because that's the reason why today so much of art just dies. It's a 2-minute wonder. I mean, not even that 15-minute fame anymore. It just comes up and it's gone, because it's so much about projection. And I think if we can keep checkmating that, I'm not saying I'm 100% about it myself, it's a challenge every time for me too, but I think if we can keep checkmating ourselves, believe you me, the work you will have out there, whatever that is, even an engagement with people and friends, end of it, that you got to stand with it. That's so important, I feel.
And something that this is really my questions and my insecurities that I go through sometimes in solitude, and I'm putting this out as questions to you. I also feel that I have to enjoy the process of it and not try to let's say put like a roadmap to it that in 5 days I have to finish this. In 5 years I have to do this. I try to enjoy the process of it, but don't you think that putting those goals or let's say setting those targets also gives you direction about what you want to chase in your creative work or let's say in general in life?
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question. I think it's a lot to do with setting those goals for within yourself, what I said earlier. When you start putting those goals for the deadline into, that approval or that show. Or I don't mean to say that one has to become lazy about it and like, okay, I'll deal with it whenever I deal with it. That's not what I'm talking about. I think it's really critical that you have the drive, and see where it comes from. It comes from very purely from the passion you have for what you're doing. It's really as simple as that. So when the passion is there, then everything else becomes secondary. If you take the secondary as your first thing, then your passion is just one small little box there. And if you've been to a college or art school or whatever, you have learned the mechanics of how to do it. So you are just thinking, oh, I saw this there, I saw that, and let me create this. Again, it's being dishonest with yourself, or towards your practice.
This is one of the audience questions that had come up in the Google form, and this person is asking, how do you manage your creative energy when you're starting or in the process of doing a project?
Yeah, so see, it's never about where you start and where you finish. As I said, I think there is creative energy is not it's not a logical part of the brain which we all know about. I think it's a lot to do with. I mean, at least I can talk about myself. These are all layers of stuff. You're reading something and something pops up and you want to research and maybe you want to work on it. You may keep doing it may take you 6 months or 5 years or whatever. And then one day you're like, okay, this is not working, but parallelly you're processing a lot of stuff in your head. A lot of processing you're doing in your creative space, whether it's output or whether it's just building it or whatever. So, ultimately it is not about working in that in these box spaces. It is an entire process. You run yourself with it, and it's a lot to do. And again, I just want to add something else. A lot of young people would ask me about how do you get ideas and how do you start this and all that. You see, it's going back to those antennas. If your heart beats for an issue out there, you will automatically go and plug into it. What you're going to do with it, whether you do an output, whether you have a show, or whether you have whatever out of it, is again secondary. It's about going and because we enjoy that stuff. And again, talking about what I spoke earlier, it is about the journey. It's about the process, which is what we love. At least, I mean, and all of you guys here and so many people in the audience, who really, really believe in creating things. Because I know myself, I mean, I started in advertising photography. I used to do cars and fashion and all that business. It was great money, but comes a point where we got out of there, got into publishing, got out of there, then started running a corporate communication company in Dubai, started doing film photography, got bored out of that, started doing documentaries, got bored out of that, got into what I do in my art space, working with conflict issues, started teaching kids photography, empowerment exercise. So, it's your own within yourself, what kind of storm you have. And that is what will churn out stuff. Because if you really start looking at because I mean, how many underwears am I gonna shoot after point if I was still working in that business or whatever that was and doing advertising work,
Yeah, I mean, it's making so much sense, and these are thoughts that I speak to myself that let's just trust and keep doing the process of it, and maybe eventually I'll figure out how in future I'll know when the dots are connecting backwards that this made sense back then when I did this in, let's say, 2015, 18, 20, whatever. Coming to something that we are currently going through, or let's say where in 2020 was the pandemic, and there was like a news article or something that that arts or the creative sector is the least important or needed job during this pandemic. But now that we are over that and the pandemic is almost like gone, what do you think? How has this COVID situation shaped the creative industry? Let's say in India, if and you can also answer about it globally. Uh, have we sort of moving towards recognizing and appreciating the work that art and artists are doing? Or in general, you can just tell us about what do you think has the COVID situation, how has it impacted the art industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, we all know that what it has done to the economics of things, no matter which profession you are in, what kind of jobs you have, it has impacted very heavily into creator space. Even the established rock stars are hurting because obviously it's not what it used to be. It's creative space is really you are engaging in a very human experience, and that if that human experience gets into this logic that okay, marketing this product is more important than sponsoring a art show, for example. it's automatically they're going to cut that off. And we know the economics and whatever else is going globally, actually. I just feel very, very concerned about, young creative people, because I think they have had the worst time possible. As such, the economics of art wasn't doing so well. And now you are all of a sudden, you have not only done that degree of 3-4 years and whatever you have studied, and you have fought your family out and like, no, I'm going to be an artist or creative person or whatever, which is non-conventional profession in our Indian context. And then all of a sudden this big pie has landed on your face where there is nothing you can do. And what is really heartbreaking is that all these individuals have actually fought their way through to get to this point. It's a really, really most unfortunate thing, because they made sure in school, whatever, they kept going through it, kept fighting, they kept at it. And all of a sudden you have landed in a space where you're totally lost. And I think at one level, I mean, forget about, depending on Ministry of Culture and all that stuff. They've got enough other stuff to do. And we don't live in those kind of countries where Germany, they will give out $100 million to every, group of whatever region or whatever in art and all that. But I think I have no answer what it would be. But I tell you one thing which I really believe in, because, I look at my own life. I've had a lot of failures, and many number of times I fell down and couldn't get up. But because, you have a passion is the reason why you're doing it. And, that's such a big gift. Unfortunately, this world, not many people have passion left, because, we get so flooded by the temptation of whatever that is, that, we lose it. So my very best to every person. I have so many people, young people I work mentor with. And I keep saying that only, that, don't give up on that, because, it's a blessing to have, it's a privilege to have something which not everybody, I mean, sure, everybody was born as an artist, whatever, but we just lose it. And if you have it, don't let it slip out. I also talk about, let's say people say about photography. I'll give you a small example. I really love photography, but I'm doing the street stuff, doesn't pay, but I still love, don't take your passion and don't make that passion. The sole purpose can never be about making a living out of your passion, because if COVID or whatever happens, all of a sudden you'll start hating your passion, because you'll start saying that, oh my God, I put all these years, what am I doing with this? This is just garbage. And it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. You are, self-loathing, you are angry with yourself, all that stuff. So I really believe that if you have a passion, think of it as like a little baby. You're going to have it for rest of your life within yourself. It's so important to keep that, because it is so easy to lose it. And the ones who have actually taken the toll and fought their way through, they've come a long way, and don't let it slip out. That's why I keep saying, don't let it slip out.
Yeah, makes I was just thinking a lot about what you were saying, and there have been times where I'm sitting and talking the same things to myself, and it was just reflecting um, to me. I wanted to ask, when I was introducing you, there was mention about Red Balloon. Can you tell us, because here there are some 40, 50 young artists and creative people who would maybe want to join you in that work, or just support or whatever in any capacity. Can you tell us about the work that you do at Red Balloon?
Yeah. So, it all started with last, I would say, 2 dozen years. I've been working in teaching photography to kids. And, and you need to get the larger sense of it. It's not just about Red Balloon, but, my own personal practice where I had 50 cameras. I would go and work with kids in East Africa, whether it's albino killing. So I work with albino kids, working in Jordan with, Palestinian camps out there, or working in Delhi in a Bangladeshi refugee colony, rag pickers colony, rather, their kids. It's all over. I've worked in many number of countries for a number of years. The reason I was doing it was, I personally, one was the joy working with kids. I wasn't trying to make them into photographers. Most of them, they all came from very underprivileged and very low income group spaces. But my whole idea was to empower kids. I always believed in that, young people, children. And this was one little engagement which I would do, which would be, photography workshop, and then you have little exhibition, and I would do fundraising and, work with an NGO, whatever. And these are, none of them were CSR or sponsorship. I used to do it out of my own thing, and I could do maybe 2 at the most or 3 at the most in a year, because it costs a lot of money to go into a lot of these places. But, it again came to a point where I realized that, I'm not making a photographer fine, but if you want to impact young people, and as a creative person, it's very critical, at least I believe in myself, because creativity or being an artist or photographer, whatever the creative person you are, it's a very egoistic space. It is very much about me, myself, and I, because that's the reason why you manage to do something different. It also has a DNA of fear of failure, the insecurity DNA within you. These are all the various elements which makes you a creative person. And what I felt was that after going through so many different practices of various kind of whatever tools I applied and work I did, so it came to a point in life, why not create a platform where you bring in other creative people and, they work with children. So, that is where it really started with. So I would work with, let's say, Dadi Padamji, who would come in as a puppeteer, and he would work with marginalized children who are concerned about sanitation and addiction. So, they got into storytelling, and then we talk about this entire space shifting further into what I call as leadership space. And so Red Balloon team would work in that space where these kids, it's not about you going back to your school and you get your little, marks on your sheet that, okay, you did some whatever NGO work or something. But this is really about creating these leaders. They become ambassadors on these issues. And these kids were going to different schools. They went and showed their entire piece of 15 minutes, including puppets and all that. They worked with 5,000 kids they have showcased. Now, imagine, there's no way I could do that on my own. There's no way I could impact children that way. And who cares about some 100-year-old man coming there and talking about, oh, do this and all that, or the government putting all these posters, save the girl child, blah, blah. These are fine. They're all okay in their own space. But you want to impact people, you need to empower young people who are going to impact the young people. And that is what Red Balloon is all about. And we work with, obviously, very much issue-based. Now, why are we doing this? So let's go further into it. You're looking at, and as I said, it's privileged, underprivileged, of kids from all kinds. We work from, 12, 13-year-old kid all the way till 25 college-going kids. The idea is that the world we live in today, there is a very huge change has happened due to technology, due to the lifestyle, due to the material, this arrival of, modernity, especially in developing countries in Asia, like India, China, and Middle East and all that stuff. What we find is that because of digital noise, because, want for more, there is no time people have with their kids. They don't have it. Even going on a holiday is a mechanical thing. Okay, you're going to go 5 days and, pack your bags, come back. And the children are struggling. I think children are struggling at a level where they are, there's anger issues and there's depression, there's suicide, there's so many things going on. So how do you grab these kids and create them into, normal? Fortunately, I came from that generation, but how do you create that normal? So what we work is, how do you create empathy? How do you create that mindfulness? So how do you create, because there's no book to learn, you don't have a chapter on empathy, it's not going to happen that way. But if you bring these kids into it and they decide what are the issues which concern them, what they're aware of, whatever little bit, some child might be talking about, human trafficking is such an issue, what can we do with that? Or somebody is talking about environment, for example. So what we do is we bring these creative partners, and the Red Balloon basically creates that platform where these kids come in and these partners come in and they work on these advocacy program. It can be art program, it can be film, photography, whatever it is. So what you're doing is you're basically empowering these kids who are basically gonna take that message further out there. And can you imagine what it does to the child? It's a huge impact within the kid, because all of a sudden you're sensitizing that child who's otherwise stuck on a screen or screaming back, mother in the back, comfort dinner table, kind of a thing. So that is attempt what Red Balloon really does. There are many other pieces here, but I'm just giving you, sound bites here.
Small question: how can we be part of it?
So
how can we be the creative partners, or whatever you were referring about?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think, the website is pretty simple. Sorry, I'm going to plug that here. It's just redballoonglobal.com. You can go and read there. You can write there. And if you have any expertise there, especially young people are so brilliant at writing and technology and, blogging and all that stuff, or any other skills you have, do bring it. And, there is always, we run internship programs. We also run mentorship programs. And, it's not an NGO. We do have, depending on what kind of expertise you bring in. So we can also get, certain money on it too, because we work with children, as I said, from all levels. Obviously marginalized kids, they are cost subsidized or sponsored. by children who are actually paying for the program.
Got it. So basically we'll go to the website and know more about this.
Yeah.
Nanika here, and because we are moving towards the last 10-15 minutes, Nanika here has a very interesting question. I'm just gonna unmute her, and then Nanika, you can go ahead with your question.
Sure. Hi, Samar. So I wanted to know, you've been in the creative space for so long. Have you compared any of your past work to where you are like right now? Are there any themes that have stood out for you, or has your process evolved, or any themes that you've iteratively improved upon in this time?
Yeah, I think one very critical, or I would say a common thread, would be about, I'm very, very excited with, when I work in, I really love unpredictable stuff. I want to go to places where I haven't, not physical spaces necessarily, but things which I haven't touched upon. And I think that even Red Balloon has arrived that way. I didn't work, I worked with kids, blah, blah, all that stuff. But, I think my work has been, I'll give you a very good example. When I moved to India in, 30 odd years back from Boston, to me, what was really exciting was that there was two different worlds. Today it's all become one, and it's also taken a huge toll on people who don't have the voice. And I think that has been my very major part of my work. And I don't mean it's just about issues, but about larger community involvement. Which is what I worked with certain community in Northeast.
And was this always what you started out with, or was it always the aim of starting out photography?
No, there was nothing. I just thought that since I kept failing school and classes and dropping out of, I think, about 14 different places in, I don't know, over 3-4 continents. So I thought this is a good tool. Let's stick to it. I had no idea. It's very easy to talk about it in hindsight because I did this, that. But, it's only you are hearing people who come to this platform, and that doesn't mean that everybody is a failure. I think a lot of people who are doing things quietly, and I really believe, I like to add something here about creativity, what we talked about, that when you get comfortable with whatever your practice is, it is actually pretty dead end. It's numbness, because you've got the success of money and name that you keep producing. It's like being a cement plant guy, you're making 5,000 bags, now you make 50,000 bags of same cement, right? I find people like, when you look at, let's say, these are names I'm talking about, let's say Satish Gujral. He was a painter and artist, and he said, oh, I'm going to become an architect. And next thing he started designing buildings, So I find people like, or let's say Satyajit Ray, very good example, where, he was doing writing also and working on the music also, and, doing the film and direction and set building and name it. That is what creativity is all about. So, these are big names, established names. There are a lot of people who do things. They're not necessarily exposed, but it's your personal thing. That are you saturated? Do you want to take that risk in going into a space where you're prepared to learn something and also prepared to fall,
I feel a little motivated and inspired right now to keep trying and keep doing a lot of side projects or passion projects that I always wanted to do, like, because I always think that no, this will just waste my time, or this will just be like a dead end or whatever, something like that. But I'm gonna bring out my diary and start doing those again. Vidula here has a very interesting question, so I'm gonna unmute Vidula. Okay. Vidula, you can unmute yourself.
I totally resonate with what you just said right now, Pawan. I'm also feeling very motivated to start something. But my question was how to go back to being creative and doing the creative stuff that you used to love doing as a kid. But right now, when you've grown up, you're not really able to do it for some reason. It could be anything like depression or responsibilities or just, but you're not able to go back to being creative and doing those creative things anymore. So how to deal with that?
Yeah, but why do you have to, as I keep saying, why do you need to block yourself that I'm not able to do it? do it in small ways. You cannot, okay, there might be financial pressure, there might be money pressure. I mean, these are the two obvious things which blocks us number of times. But why are you setting yourself with deadlines? Think of it that I love doing it and I'll keep doing it, because there's nobody is waiting out there that, okay, come 5th of June, I need to showcase it out there. Because then you are really, that's not really what you believe in. That you really believe in that 5th of June, basically.
Yeah. Vidula, I hope that answers your question to some extent, at least. Trina, I'm going to unmute you because Trina has a very interesting question here, which is more like a connecting to what you said in the beginning, and also very recently towards the end, what you were referring about empathy. Trina, over to you.
Yes. So in the beginning of the conversation, I wrote this down because I loved it so much. You said creativity is the platform human beings connect on. And a couple of questions ago, you talked about empathy a little bit. So just sort of bringing it all together, why is empathy or for human beings to connect so important? And what is the role of creativity in that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I kind of answered you right. I think it's empathy is, that's what makes us human beings, right? What we are talking about, the AIs of the world, we are talking about the mechanization, whatever. These are things which truly, I think that's what human beings are. I think, we have managed to sustain ourselves, including, most horrible wars and most horrible hatreds. We have managed to sustain ourselves is because of we have empathy in us. You may be selective empathy. Yes, people suffer that also. But I think it's a natural, inner flame we have, which is what lights our world. It's not about going through, mechanical processes. Sorry if that was the right answer or not, but that's my limited thought.
It was a good answer. I don't know if it was a good answer. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Trina. Someone, I think in one of your TED talks, you had mentioned that artists have difficulty in using their left brain, and they face challenges or difficulties in monetizing their art, or bringing that corporate structure to art. Why do you think so? This is like because I also feel this, and I feel a lot of artists have this little challenge when they are growing. Why do you think this is like a very persistent or very common problem with artists?
Yeah, so as we spoke earlier, it's finally it's about survival, right? I mean, you do things where you just cannot sit in isolation and keep making art if it's not gonna go anywhere. You do want to hang it on a wall, and you do want to sell it and all that. So that challenge is there. Unfortunately, the times we live in, it has become more difficult because the noise is so much. That how do you make sure that your work is seen or shown or sold or whatever that is. I still believe that because of, again, you have to go back to the purity about your practice to yourself. If you have something very sensible, you don't need to go through a art college to get a degree to start painting, if you know what I mean. Because if you are very honest about it, what you are creating, whatever that is, believe you me, in this noisy world, you just keep building blocks, and it's going to show up someday, because there are people who are looking for the right thing, because always going to be millions and billions of images, whatever that practice is. But I think you have to be honest to it. And as I said earlier, that if it's your passion, if it's killing you because you're not able to sell it, then don't tie that selling to your passion, because you will kill, end of the day, you'll kill your passion. And that's a terrible thing to lose, because some of us have sustained that all this while. And I don't mean that you have to be a full-time artist. You can be anything, but you got to stick to your passion. Is something which, don't start looking at your bank balance each time. Of course, you got to be a great marketer and you need to do all your PR and all that. But, I'm not here for all that. This is a different topic about how to sell and how to connect and how to do your networking and blah, blah, all that stuff, But that's a different process,
Yeah. And this is my last question, which is more like, I would say we want to know the story of this from you. how was the whole project of documenting Burj Khalifa for you? And if you could just tell us in few minutes about what that entire
Yeah.
project was and how it.
Yeah, so I set up a small corporate communication company in Dubai, which was doing some branding work, and we started doing photography and film because there came a point where commercially, I couldn't do more than what one day would. There's only so much of time you have. So I basically conceptualized the entire documentation of downtown Dubai with Burj Khalifa and the world's biggest mall and all that stuff. The client was, of course, it took them 6 months to finally say yes, because it was a very big ticket project where they had to sign up for 6 years. So we would create all these documents. So we set up 5 camera positions and we created time-lapse films. There were no drones that time, so we would do they were putting, I think, one floor every 4 days or something. So we're doing a lot of helicopter shoots. We worked on the world's biggest aquarium, this specialized aircraft which flew sea life all the way from Thailand into this biggest aquarium. We worked with Giorgio Armani. He put up his first hotel in that property. So there were a lot of different things we worked on. A lot of stuff went into the Skyscraper Museum in New York City. A lot of stuff went on Nat Geo and Discovery and shows like Mega Builders and all that. But what really came out of it was that I could actually create this mechanical process, which was being done. I would interact with the client once a month or something. But the larger thing was that I had the luxury of taking that money and going and doing what I actually do, which is the Bhopal, which is the funning, which is the outpost, which is teaching, whatever it is. This is what when I say that, how do you balance your creative personal stuff with your commercial stuff? Of course, it came to a point where I didn't want to do that commercial anymore, because I started questioning myself that, what is this yin yang balancing act? Are you being very honest about it, or are you just trying to play this, okay, I'm earning it there, so I'm spending it there? So these are very personal issues. We all have different answers to it depending on where we are coming from. So yeah, the Burj was a very interesting project. It helped me do, I was very interested in shooting people who were building that tower. There are 3,500 people who were never, most of them were never photographed till they got their passport the very first time. I'm talking labor, construction workers. So I decided, let's create passport pictures of these people, and I started shooting portraits, and I shot 3,500 portraits. So every man who's built that tower, I have a portrait of it. So I got my personal work out of it.
Samar, I think one thing I've been noticing throughout the session is the number of participants here never dropped below 40, 45. It was always, let's say, 47, 48, but there were like constant 40, 45 people who were there throughout the conversation. And that itself, is like a, let's say like a signal that, this has been such an inspiring and insightful conversation for everyone. And I'm so glad that you allowed us to record this, because when people are going to see this, they're going to be like, oh wow, our antennas are now open, and they're wide open. There are also people in the chat section saying that they feel very enlightened and inspired through the whole conversation. Never let go of your passion, never stop loving your passion, and all good things about you and the conversation that we have had. An interesting thing that I want to tell everyone here who's in the audience today is, I think I spoke to Samar over DM 3 years back when we wanted to invite him to this Agra trip that we were doing about shooting a film and something like that. It did not, happen back then in 2017. But guys, 3 years later is when we are actually doing this conversation. Wow. And this was also on a very short notice. I think on Wednesday or Thursday is when I spoke to you on Instagram. Would you be interested to do this on a Sunday evening? And thank you so much from everyone who's present here today that you gave us your time on a Sunday evening. I find and for some people, if you have not noticed, it's actually his house. It's not a background like I have here. Your house is really pretty. Please invite us. We're going to be shameless about it. Please invite us. And
it's open house. So whenever you are in town, get yourself tested and you're very welcome.
Thank you so much. Trina, do you want to say anything before we end the session?
Yes, just thank you. And what I also wrote in the comment section that Pavan, I'm really glad you decided to call this session what we don't understand about creativity instead of what we don't understand about art, which is, I think, sort of what I might have done if I was curating it. But like spot on, because I think, Samar, the biggest thing I'm taking away from here is how creativity is so, it's this cloud, and the art is just one showcase of it. And I think that's a very new perspective for me. So thank you for that, and so many other new perspectives. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks for your time, everyone.